Welcome in, Fantasy Play Callers!
Welcome in, everybody!
I hope you guys are having a great Monday Night Football day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? The playoffs, the fantasy playoffs are here. They're upon us!
It's the cusp. It's what we all been working for all year. This is the time. This is the crunch time. How did you end up?
Yeah, and if you're anything like me, you are watching right now on this little phone that you might see snuck over here.
Yeah.
They're sneaking peeks because I'm on the verge in a league. Few I'm in.
Yep.
Few I'm not so in. So it's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, and we're going to get into some of that today. How we did a little bit, and we'll talk about advice that we have going into the fantasy playoffs, and should be a
great podcast.
Good podcast, great podcast today. You've got the Storment Brothers here with you. Of course, I'm Ethan.
Eli.
Yeah, and we are missing our good buddy Dakota, who is out sick today. So,
get well, Dakota.
Yes.
We'll welcome you back when we're healthy.
Yes, excited to have you back. But until then, you're stuck with us.
Yep, this is it.
The Stormer Bros over here. We're going to have a great time.
Holding it down.
Some great fantasy football advice going into the playoffs and making sure that you know how you can set yourself up to have the best chance possible to win your league.
Yes, absolutely. The seeding has taken place. We know where you are after tonight, so now it's a matter of preparing for your opponent and getting the right pickups here. Hopefully find some diamonds in the rough that can push you over the edge for the fantasy playoffs. So
yeah, absolutely. And does your opponent change how you play? Do you maybe start somebody with a little bit more upside but a little bit more risk if you're worried about whether or not you can beat them? Do you kind of go more safe if you feel really comfortable you can beat them, or how do you play that matchup game in the fantasy playoffs? What do you think, Eli?
Yeah, I think it really does matter who you're playing and how well that team has done all year and what their team it looks like with the matchup, with the projections they always have out there. But yeah, I think that really plays into who you look at starting and who you want to play. Like if you have a team that is a juggernaut that's 10-3 or whatever the case is so far this year, and you're facing the number one seed, which they'll probably have the bye, but maybe you have a team that is really coming on at the end of the year that's really projected a lot of points. Sure. You do want to try to hit some of these bigger home run plays that you can have out there, because if you probably play your normal lineup, you probably don't have a chance to win, and you want to put something out there where at least you have a chance, right? If you play some of the safer guys that maybe you pick up, waiver wire guys, you might not put yourself in a position to at least have a chance to put it out there for those big explosive weeks that could possibly happen. So
yeah. If you're, I couldn't agree more. If you're down in the matchup, don't be afraid to take risks. If you're up in the matchup, and maybe you're playing a very dangerous team, which can happen. Some teams aren't necessarily good, but they're the team that has the week. They're either scoring 170, 180, or they're scoring 60. You know what I mean? And if you're playing one of those teams, maybe it's worth it to take a little bit of risk, because if they do have that big week, you're going to have to match them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, no, definitely, I think that's a good place to start. And then, let's get into some news and some injury reports.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this week there's a big injury list. It's that time of year, I feel like, where things are starting to pile up. Some really big, impactful fantasy players that are out there that have recently got injured too. Let's start off with Deebo Samuel. He had a high ankle injury this last week. I don't know if you saw the injury, but he got carted off, I believe, and it looked really bad initially when it happened, but
not good.
Not good. It sounds like it's going to be a high ankle. Typically, high ankles can be anywhere from typically 2 to 4 weeks, I would say. So definitely doubtful for this week. He can come back sooner, so maybe in a couple weeks. Really pay attention to the practice reports and everything updated, but I would lean more towards more the 2 to 3 week.
Probably not someone that you're counting on for at least the first couple weeks of the playoffs, and maybe not the whole playoffs at all. And you know what? With the Niners being the position that they're in, where I believe they are they're in the playoffs right now, but on the cusp of getting that first round bye.
Yeah, for real playoffs, they want them back. They want Deebo back, or they need him back. So
yeah, so very much like him back. So there's maybe a chance that they rush him a little bit in order, if they still do have that chance for that bye in a couple weeks, and if they don't, unfortunately, and they're kind of locked in the playoffs, you might see a situation where maybe they don't rush him back and save him for the playoffs too, which could happen.
Right.
So keep an eye on that. Remember, real world playoffs do affect fantasy playoffs too. So do with that what you will.
Definitely. The next guy is not very, I would say, fantasy relevant at this point. Russell Wilson he had that concussion. They said that he lost consciousness for a little bit actually out there, and he's definitely doubtful for next week with the concussion stuff. And it's probably good for everybody that you don't start Russell Wilson on your fantasy team anyway. So.
Yes, probably good for fantasy that he's out, so you have to start someone else if you were still somehow in the playoffs and starting him.
Yeah.
But no, I feel bad for Russell Wilson. Head injuries are always extra scary.
They are.
So, hope everything goes well, but yes.
Absolutely. Let's get down to another bigger fantasy play. This hurt a lot of people last week with him going out kind of right away in the game. T. Higgins had a hamstring injury, led to a very big game by Jamar Chase, I might add.
Which did not make some of us angry at all, but I feel bad for Higgins. But I'll take the Jamar Chase game where I can get it.
Those Higgins owners did not feel the same. So
yes.
But no, he has mild hamstring. It does sound like he's questionable, so he does have a chance to play, but hamstrings are tough. Like they typically are a couple-week injury. We've had the experience with Keenan Allen this year and some others that they can linger too. So really pay attention to this one, see how he's progressing, and see what you can do.
And to be honest, the scariest part with hamstring injuries to me is that you can get good news and it can seem like everything is going exactly according to plan, and then right before the game you can find out, oh no, we were just kidding. He actually re-aggravated it and it's back now.
Or even re-aggravating it at practice is something that easily can happen because it doesn't take much to re-aggravate a hamstring. That's why those hamstrings are really, obviously concussions are probably the biggest because you're dealing with your head, but for as far as re-injury is concerned.
As far as fantasy football goes, hamstrings probably even worse than a concussion.
More lingering, I would say. So
for sure.
Next one, Mike White. He got killed on that hit. I don't know if you saw that out there, but he got drilled right in the ribs, like his whole body caved around a defender. And it turned out obviously he had
on a clean hit.
Yeah, it was
very
great hit.
Executed, by the way, because it's tough to get clean hits on the quarterback in the modern NFL. It was surprisingly clean for how painful it looked.
Yes, exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep. I was wondering if they're going to throw a flag just for the fact that it looked bad. Sometimes they look at doing that. But super clean hit him exactly where he was supposed to with the shoulder in the rib cage. Unfortunately, for Mike Wright. Mike White, not Mike Wright. His ribs are fractured, which this is a pain tolerance thing, which apparently, thank God it's never happened to me, but ribs are one of the most painful things that you can have actually happen for anything to happen.
Yes.
But
I'll never forget, I had a friend in middle school who broke his ribs riding dirt bike, and we spent the rest of the day making him laugh. And he cried. Every time he would laugh, he would also literally physically cry because it hurts so bad to move your body like that. Luckily, these guys do have some lidocaine and stuff, and they're very tough in the NFL.
Right. And you probably give it an extra flak jacket, but at the same time, you're still taking these huge hits like that. So I think I lean towards him playing. This is just a personal opinion, but it, like I said, it's definitely a pain tolerance more than anything else. So.
Yeah, and if not, we get to see Joe Flacco's return.
Hey, better than the other guy.
Because we're not going to see Zach Wilson back on the field, if we're being honest.
He'll be the backup.
Yeah. So, and then Kenny Pickett is doubtful next week with a concussion, which means we're back to seeing more of Mitchell Trubisky, who is not...
He immediately threw 2 picks.
Not great.
I just want to put that out there. As bad as Kenny Pickett has been, Trubisky came in and immediately threw 2 picks.
Yeah, no, it's been bad. And so it's especially for George Pickens owners, Deontay Johnson owners.
The only person who really were playing is probably George Pickens. Deontay's been so low,
hit or miss for sure.
It's been really low for his output. George Pickens just have a chance at a touchdown and long play. I don't think there's a big difference for the fantasy value for Pickens, though, because the thing about Trubisky, he's willing to throw it. The problem is the other team gets it. Yeah, so I think Pickens will still get his shots, and he's still worth a play. I don't think it impacts his value a whole lot, in my opinion.
I would say I would downgrade him slightly.
Okay.
I would. I do think that Pickens is a better passer by a bit, and it will be on the deep balls, but you're splitting hairs at some point too.
Trubisky supported Deontay had a better output with Trubisky at the beginning of the year, and so did Claypool too.
Yeah, which actually might be interesting to kind of see too. Is that does Trubisky come back in and go right back to Deontay, who is a very good wide receiver as well. They have all the wide receivers, or did at least when Claypool's gone, but still Pickens and Deontay is enough to support a team.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah,
a little straight over there.
Anyway.
Some injuries that happened tonight, so we obviously are still watching the game. This is Monday night right now, but really bad one that happened right at the beginning of the game. Kyler Murray, non-contact injury. Looks like it. I mean, from all the immediate reaction to people out there, it looks like to be a serious knee injury. We don't know exactly what it is at this point, but probably ACL, something like that could be out for the year.
It appears to be season ending, and this is honestly, it didn't even look that bad, but just by Kyler Murray's reaction, you could tell that he felt something bad happened to his body, and whenever that happens, especially on a non-contact injury, those players are out for a long time. And so something bad happened to Kyler Murray. I have no doubts about that. If you have him, and we're planning on starting him for the playoffs, you should make other plans immediately, and you should not count on Kyler Murray being there because it is very unlikely that he is going to play again this year.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. So. Another injury happened in this game, Ramondre Stevenson, he had an ankle injury. It was very weird. He went out, was out down on the ground for quite a long time, and then he did come back in the game for about 5 snaps, I think, and then he went back out again. So no information at this point when we're recording this podcast. But to me, I mean, I'm hoping it's a little ankle sprain to have him in a few leagues, but hopefully not the high ankle variety because that could be a longer term issue. So
I have him in a few leagues as well. Ramondre has been an excellent pickup. If you did manage to get him this year, he's been fantastic. So this is definitely big for the fantasy playoffs. We'll wait to hear news tomorrow and kind of fill you guys in. But this is one to be watching on that waiver wire. Not waiver wire, but on that injury report and whatever app you use. Just hop in and read their little notes. They'll tell you whether or not they practice. Remember, that's the most important thing that we're looking for in these types of people is, what's the injury first off? We'll get that news tomorrow. And then, is he practicing this week? If he is practicing, great. If he's not, you have a whole other set of problems.
And if he's not you really want to pay attention to during the week, but really especially towards the end, like Thursday, Friday, see what the practice reports are there, because that really is a telltale sign. If they're not practicing on Thursday or Friday, or even if it's just limited, it could be a playing towards not playing. So, Corey Davis, another one we want to mention here real fast. He had a concussion, doubtful for this week with concussions. Traylon Burks should be back this week. He had a concussion as well, so he's getting through the protocol. So he was really close this week, so he should be back next week, which is pretty big for the Tennessee Titans as a team.
Well, they only had 2 active wide receivers on the roster this week, so they need him just for the numbers. And he's the best wide receiver on that roster.
I'll be talking about one of their breakout tight ends later, so just a heads up there. Little preview action.
Mystery, intrigue.
Yeah, exactly. Cortland Sutton, he had a hamstring. He was out this week. It sounds like he will be out next week as well. Again, these hamstrings are just hard to deal with. So he does have potential to come back the week following. Again, I would just try to plan to have somebody else that you can go with, just based off of...
You didn't really want to be starting Cortland Sutton when he was 100% healthy, guys.
The volume was there, at least. I mean, you get like 10 to maybe 15 points, 10 to 12 probably. It's kind of what you're looking at. But it was definitely not a great play.
Yes, and now coming off the hamstring injury, even if he is healthy, with what is probably going to be a backup quarterback next week, and Brett Wright.
Although Wright was pretty decent.
There were times where he looked better than Russ, if I dare say that as a Broncos fan. But no, it's true. But I still would not have any faith, especially into the first week of the playoffs, to be starting Cortland Sutton.
I do have to say it. Jerry Jeudy. If you do have Jerry Jeudy, this does give it a boost for Jeudy as a strong flex play if Cortland Sutton continues to be out.
Especially if Sutton is completely out.
Yes. A lot of the volume is just going to have to go. There's not a lot of other options. Cortland Sutton, and then I'd say Dolchich too as a good tight end if you have him as well.
And he's actually Dolchich has been probably the most playable person on that team at the moment. So I completely agree with that assessment as well.
Brandon Cooks, he is doubtful this week for the ankle. I keep track of the practice reports. I did see that he might actually be questionable. I think it was. He did play this week. I think he might have got a limited practice in it today, but I keep track of the practice reports. He might be coming back.
He very well might be. The other thing about this one, and one of the reasons that we think he might not be coming back, is because of that dispute that he had with the team, and maybe this is a little bit of a, I'm here, but we're 1-13 now?
Yeah, something crazy like that. Yeah.
Or 1-12-1 or whatever they are. There was one victory, in this week 14.
Yeah.
So look, we're not playing for anything. I'm an older wide receiver. Even if I'm a little hurt, I don't understand why Brandon Cooks would want to come back and risk his body and risk his career and risk that last contract for a team that, quite frankly, is playing for draft picks. I mean, they want to lose anyway and see what they have with the younger guys. So we'll see what happens. Maybe he does just play for the love of the game. But I would, once again, not someone I would want to be counting on for the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. Lamar Jackson, another big name out there for fantasy players. He hasn't been playing up to his potential recently, so he's been a little bit disappointing. But he was out this week with an MCL sprain, and it sounds like he will be out this coming week, week 15. Does sound like he could come back week 16. The other thing on this that I want to touch on too, Tyler Huntley, who is the backup to Lamar Jackson, also got a concussion during last week's game, so something to watch there. They may be going to the third string.
Yes, who is, do you know?
Shoot, I remember.
I don't actually know off the top of my head either. I have to look.
We're letting that real quick. But yeah, so it's potential to go down to the third string, and there's Mark Andrews has been, we won't spend a lot of time on him, but he's been super disappointing based off of partly his injuries, and then now Lamar and Huntley have gone out. So you're down to a third string quarterback with Mark Andrews, and I think I'm going to pull up his line, but I think he only had 2 catches this last week. We're in the crunch time, and I want to put this question out here real quick. What do you think? Are you willing? Well, one, are you willing to bench Mark Andrews, or are you just playing through and hoping for the best?
If I have Evan Ingram and Mark Andrews on my roster, I'm starting Evan Ingram next week.
Wow.
I'll put it that way.
Wow.
And I want to have a replacement that I feel like has a decent ability to have some upside and some floor.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, I'm not benching him for just anybody.
Yeah, it's true.
But if I have a decent backup,
maybe I'm overblowing that. This week was really bad. He only had 2 catches for 17 yards. The previous weeks, he did have 7 targets, and 8 targets. So he's been really targeted. He had 4 catches, 50 yards, 4 catches, 53 yards, 6 catches for 63 yards. So he hasn't been killing your lineup. He just hasn't been putting up those Mark Andrew 20 to 25 point weeks that we're typically accustomed to. Mm-hmm. And that's partly because they're just not getting any touchdowns on the offense either. So.
Yeah, let's put it this way. The last time Mark Andrews has had a game above 15 points was week 6.
Yeah, he was injured week 7, He came in week 8, got re-injured, and was injured week 9, and then had a week 10 bye. So there is definitely a lot of injuries in there. The last 4 healthy though. Again, I think he's above average for tight ends, especially how bad tight ends are. So I think it's hard to sit him. Yeah. I just would lower your expectations because the offense itself has just not been.
Yeah, really good. I mean, in the last games that he's played, it's been 6, 12, 11, 9, and 3.
Yeah.
I'm starting Evan Ingram over that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Maybe we could play, when we get into the tight end streamers, but maybe we should play a game of...
tight end is just...
It's a rough...
It's absolutely terrible. It's one of the... It's hard to look at with your eyes. Let's finish up the injury side of it. Kenneth Walker was out this week. He was pretty close to playing, so it does sound like he's going to be back this next week, which is good for fantasy playoffs.
Yeah. And a limited participant in practice today, which is a huge step in the right direction, considering it's only Monday. That's a big thing, especially for running back.
That's a great call. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Good news there.
Yep. And then Darren Waller is coming off the injury reserve this week, and they're saying that he should play Week 15. Now keep an eye on the practice reports.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I know.
It's been such a long road for him.
It does feel like, I think, was his the hamstring too? I'll look that up. But it just seemed like he just kept saying he was going to play, then he'd finally went on injury reserve, and now he's coming off of it, saying he's going to come back and play. So, but yeah, it's been a terrible injury-ridden year for Darren Waller. That is absolutely for sure. So
yeah, it really has been horrible. If you've drafted him and had faith in him, or really the Raiders, with the exception of Josh Allen for the most part, and Devontae Adams.
Josh Allen,
or not Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs.
Well, I was going to say they have the number one running back and the number one wide receiver.
All right, fine. But anyone else on their team,
yes.
Derek Carr, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, we're all expected to do good things as well.
But I also think part of reason why both of those players are so good is because
volume.
Well, volume and then part of their offensive weapons weren't available for long stretches. Like Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. That's part of the reason why I was a little bit off on Devontae, or a little bit further down, just because there's a lot of other weapons there. But when all other weapons go out, guess what?
Yes, and Colt McCoy just had a heck of a scramble there.
Still got it.
He still got it. Classic Colt McCoy.
Colt McCoy, man. Texas.
Shoot from the hip.
Yep.
Texas.
There can't be more of a Texas name than Colt McCoy. Like, that's just amazing.
You know what? That's a good point. It is a really good point.
Damn.
He is Texas incarnate.
Yeah, exactly. Wrapping up the injuries, another big fantasy impact. Jeff Wilson did go out of the game last week for Miami. He had a hip injury. Does seem like he's unlikely to play this week against Buffalo. And that is big for Raheem Mostert owners. He's going to get the majority of the work. It's a good offense. Obviously, we talked about them all year. They did not look good last game. Tua did not look good at all, but I would imagine they would get it back together, and that should be a really big boost for starting Mostert if you need to in the playoffs.
Yeah, you should feel really comfortable starting him compared to what you would have felt this week. If Jeff Wilson is indeed out, which
sounds like it is.
Sounds like it could be the case.
So those are the injuries. And then as far as news goes, there wasn't a lot out there, mostly the injury side of it. One signing that I didn't want to mention, I don't know if you saw this today, but T.Y. Hilton did get signed by the Dallas Cowboys. So
I did not see that. So that is
interesting. Interesting. It has impact. I'm not running to anywhere to pick up T.Y. Hilton. He did not look good. He looked okay the last couple of years in Indianapolis, but nothing to write home about. He's a big play threat that's available.
Yeah, he looks like a speedy wide receiver who's getting all done running out of juice. If I'm being honest, but he still has NFL skills and NFL techniques, and is a smart player that will do fine, given the opportunity. But I don't know how much opportunity he will have there, and I'm not.
What the bigger thing is, what does this mean for? Does this mean they're not going to sign Odell?
Yeah, that does point in the direction of probably not. The other thing about Odell is there have been some reports that his injury might not be completely done as well. So that maybe they were looking at signing him, and then maybe Odell himself was like, it doesn't matter because I'm not ready.
Actionable advice then. Are you keeping Odell now for a roster spot? Because a lot of people have him currently based off of the news and are waiting for it to be coming through. But we're in playoff time. We're talking about pickups this week. Are you keeping him, or are you dropping him for any of the things people?
I actually already dropped him last week upon hearing that news, and I would encourage others to do the same. This is playoff time. You need players that are going to play. Yeah. And I know Odell sounds great, and it's good to be hopeful, and I totally get that. If this was week 3 or 5 or 7, I would be like, go for it. But look,
you don't have a lot of time.
There's not a lot of time left, and even if he signs with the Buffalo Bills, which might be the best case scenario tomorrow.
I think for volume, probably Buffalo Bills or Cowboys probably.
One of those. If he signs wherever you think is the best place, the best place you can think of him signing, he signs tomorrow. Yeah. You starting him next week? No. And that's the thing is look, this is the playoffs. You have to win right now.
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
Drop him. Grab someone who might actually have a chance to contribute to your roster next week, in my opinion, and go from there.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
Sounds good.
Who knows? It might come back to bite me too. But
hey, who knows?
But that's my take. That's my hot take.
Excellent. Well, that is our injury and news. Keep an eye out throughout the week for more injury and news. Follow us on Twitter. We'd be happy to get you updated as well. But let's get into our fantasy waiver wire pickups this week. We'll start off with the most important side of fantasy football, running backs.
The running backs. This is the time of the year where it gets difficult, right?
It's very difficult, definitely.
To find some running backs. But there are guys out there that are some nuggets. And actually, if you don't mind, I would love for you to lead off, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think that Eli's going to start us off with really the guy who is the pickup right now, if he's available in your league, which he is in most leagues, 67% of leagues, to be exact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Chuba Hubbard at 33% currently owned. He had a great week last week. It became more of a split this week compared to what has been in the past for Devontae Foreman and the Carolina Panthers. He had 14 rushes, 74 yards, and touchdown. And they, just as a team, and I think it's going to be a continued split going forward, but as a team, they've just been running the ball a lot. And obviously, even if you have a two-headed monster, if you're running the ball that much, two people can live in the backfield at the same time. And
definitely.
And Chuba, obviously the touchdown helps a lot, but we've always talked about, Foreman's kind of the bigger back, kind of the more grinded out, and Chuba is more, he still can do that, but he is definitely more the pass catching, kind of more of the third down back type of thing. So you do get a little bit more of that as well, which we all know is super valuable in fantasy, in addition to what he's put up this week. So looking out there for just somebody that is getting involved and is able to get some points, and they're currently next week going against Pittsburgh, which their defense has not been as good as it's been in the past next week. So I think he's definitely worth a pickup and a play if you need to put him in your lineup.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that if you're looking for a running back that you can start next week, that's probably in your free agency, Chuba Hubbard is about as good as you're going to do.
Yeah.
Which, once again, this is playoff time. Let's win now, right? And I think that he's the best person to give you the chance to do that.
Yeah, and the snap percentage splits, Foreman had 47% and Chuba had 37%. So this is a true kind of... not quite 50-50, but it's a true split. And so I think that's going to continue going forward, too.
Yeah, most definitely. Excellent. And then my pickup here is actually someone that I did not think I would be saying this person's name at the moment, if I'm being honest. One, because he's a Bronco, which is not exactly a team that you want to invest in too heavily this year in fantasy football. But Marlon Mack did very well this last week. As far as overall numbers. Now, I know a lot of that came off of that big screenplay that he took, all the way to the house, and so I did get that. The Marlon Mack was given, only very few chances, like 5 or 6 chances with the ball this last week. He did very good with those chances, and he did make a big play and looked, pretty good on the other chances that he had.
Yep.
And so if you're the head coach, especially with Mike Boone out and Latavius Murray having stones for hands. I do think Marlon Mack is kind of the guy that you have to go to in the screen game at this point, at least for a little while, to see how this goes and hope that something good happens in that offense. So I think Hackett will do that, which means that I think Marlon Mack is pick-upable and in a pinch, startable in fantasy football for the next coming weeks, which is why I will suggest that you grab him. He's owned in 3% of leagues. You should be able to get him super cheap.
Shouldn't have spent a lot on him, and he showed that he had some burst there, so I think that's great. Great look.
Cool.
Sounds good. I'll jump over to my second one here. I talked about him actually last week as well, just as another reminder, because again, we're looking at, right now who is involved, number one, but number two, the handcuffs. We've talked about it all year, especially this time of year. We need to have handcuffs, especially if you have this running back. So I'm talking about Jordan Mason. He's 13% owned still. He had 11 rushes for 56 yards last week with Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers. This is a great team. They love to run the ball, especially with Purdy back there. They're going to try to minimize having Purdy to have the control of the game. They want to be able to run the ball and play defense.
I don't know. Purdy looked pretty good though.
Purdy looked pretty, but
no,
they want in an ideal situation, you don't want your last pick of the draft to be taking control of the game and throwing a lot of balls there. So yes, Jordan Mason, he is the backup for Christian McCaffrey. Anything happens to him, he's going to be the number one pickup by far of the week. And currently, he's going to have some value too, based off of what we've seen in his usage here the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, I completely agree.
A really good pickup and stash.
Yeah, especially if you own
Christian McCaffrey. I think he's really a must, especially in the playoffs. This is where if your guy goes down, and we just talked about these are the pickups that we're going. These are the best ones that we have out there, and we just scour it. And nothing against Chuba Hubbard or Marlon Mack, but these guys are typically, if I started the healthy season, these are the third or fourth running backs on a team we're talking about now. So you need to have these other higher end handcuffs on your team.
Yeah, because if McCaffrey goes down, Jordan Mason is instantly an RB2. Instantly, and you're not going to get that out of the rest of the guys. Really. And
we'll throw some other handcuffs after your last one out there. But yes, reason why I have handcuffs too is even if it's not your guy, if they go down, all of a sudden you have at least an RB2, if not higher, on your team, right? For these higher end handcuffs. Now, the more questionable backfields can get a little gray, but the ones that we know have the talent and have the usage that will come if an injury comes. So.
And then my last one here is going to be Tyler Algier. Now, Tyler the Fiver is what I'm going to call him because he scores about 5 points every week, which is not great. However, as we mentioned, the waiver wire is pretty pick thin right now. So if you need to get somebody that's going to come in and have a chance, he's going to score you at least 5, okay? And then he's going to have a chance at a touchdown and maybe get you to 11, right? Which is not something that you want to do, but if you are desperate and you're in the playoffs and you need someone that you know will put up points, which sometimes is hard to find. Tyler Algier is a great option to go out and get you somebody who's going to score some points and he's going to touch the ball.
He's going to have
in the NFL game.
Which is a big piece of scoring fantasy points.
Which you have to do in order to score fantasy points. And maybe Desmond Ridder is the greatest thing to ever touch, quarterbacks in the history of quarterbacks, and they have a great game, and Algier scores 4 touchdowns. Who knows? Probably not. But you never know. So this is really kind of someone, if you're desperate and you need to pick him up, please do. I would be careful who you drop for him, to be honest, at this point. But
I think it's a great, like I said, plug and play pickup if you're desperate and need somebody to kind of fill a spot. So I think that's a good call out there too. One thing we want to mention, I want to go through a couple of those handcuff guys. Before we do that, with the new injury, since we of course didn't have a chance to really talk this through with Stevenson, we don't know enough information to know how long he's out. But out of these running backs that are currently on the roster behind Stevenson, who are you prioritizing between Pierre Strong, Damian Harris, who's right at the cusp? He's at 50%, so he might be owned, he might not be. Or Kevin Harris, who's the rookie who's had some playing time this week too.
I think that right now, Kevin Harris, it looks like it's going to be the backup. I actually think that Pierre Strong might be more interesting in the long run. But this, once again, guys, you need touches tomorrow. Not, 3 years from now. So Kevin Harris has actually looked pretty good on the touches that he's had. He's performed well. I would go out and grab Kevin Harris assuming Stevenson's injury is, something severe. We don't know. We are in the middle of that game, as we mentioned.
Right. I think this is more speculation because we don't have all the data right now. We were just based off. We were not able to watch the full game doing the podcast. I actually lean towards Pierre Strong actually for the pickup. I know Harris got the touchdown. He looked pretty decent for the few carries that he's had. But I think I was just going to pull up the stats currently. I think Pierre has a little bit So it's been a pretty even split. But Pierre had a kind of a bigger run. He had a 44-yard run.
Yeah, he did. He broke one out.
Yeah, and he's had 2 catches for 20 yards too.
Which Pierre Strong ran in the 4.3. So I mean, he can break one when the opportunity arises. South Dakota State, baby.
Ooh, yeah.
For those of you who don't know,
we're originally from South Dakota, which you don't get a lot of shout-outs. So we're gonna put that out there.
That's right. So we'll shout out Pierre Strong Junior from South Dakota State. Much love, man. And we do hope that you crush it. I'm definitely rooting for him.
Well, and the biggest thing for this pickup for me is who's going to get that work in the passing game, because that's where Stevenson actually created a lot of his value, most of his value, actually.
And the Patriots throw the most screens in the NFL currently, which is worth noting, right? Especially for the running back position.
Correct. And so Stevenson's averaging 5 to 6 catches a game. And so...
Yeah.
Based off the limited data that we have, Pierre's the one that got the couple targets, 20 yards, and he had that explosive run. So I'm leaning towards Pierre Strong as of right now. If Stevenson's out next week, if longer, and if that's the case, I think you would agree with this. Like, whoever we decide is the running back to go after, they're going to be the number 1 pickup of the week, based off of depending on the injury, right?
Yes, assuming Ramondre is out next week. Yes, which we don't know.
We don't know.
You might know.
But we just want to put that out there in case that news does come out, so you can get prepared for when you put your waiver wires in. Prioritize this these running backs. So, real quick, 2 last things, and then I promise we'll move on. Handcuffs. Name a few that you are targeting out there, or that you think that people should pick up. I know Alexander Madison is definitely one.
Always a good one.
Yep. I know there's a few others out there that I know.
Jalen Warren.
Jalen Warren was another one.
Is one that I'm still targeting, especially if you have Najee. Although he's been the guy despite everything, I still think Warren might be worth having.
Joshua Kelly for Los Angeles Chargers
has looked very good.
He looks really good out there, and he's now got the backup role kind of secured for.
Sorry, Isaiah Spiller Truthers. It is Josh Kelly's world, and we're all just living in it.
Yes, we already talked about Jordan Mason, which that was already talked about. Kind of those are pick up of the week, but
yes, and then Keontae Ingram, who has played a little bit this week because James Conner went out again, and this has happened multiple times where he's gone out for a small injury and come right back in. Props to James Conner for being such a tough dude, but that does say something for an older running back who's a bit of a power back, who's taking a lot of big hits. I want his rookie backup because if he does get the starting role, it's a big deal. It is. No, that's a really good call out there too. I think even like a Jermichael Hasty would be a good one to call out. Well, especially with Etienne did not have a good week this week at all. So, and they are willing to mix it up. Doug Peterson's very willing to start a committee if need be. So if Etienne does not have a good week, very quickly Hasty could be a bigger part of that equation. Yeah, absolutely. Even if Etienne is healthy. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then P. Ryan, I think we've all seen the experience of how well he played when Joe Mixon's out. Obviously, Joe Mixon's back and healthy, but really a big handcuff. Another larger, older, power back. He's 28 years old. Yep. Looked really good out there, though. Has looked very good. Yes. And then higher owned people that are most likely owned, but J.K. Dobbins looked good coming back. Although he had one run that looked like he was limping a little bit. Did you see that? No, I missed that one. Okay, he had a long run. I saw his long run, but he limped afterwards? Well, he looked like he was limping during. That's what they said when he was running. Like looked like he was almost limping. So interesting. But nothing came out. But he looked really good. Obviously getting most of the work there. Then Cam Akers, again, it's a lot of great week. And then highlight one that you called out last week, which I'll take the credit here. Jerick McKinnon got a lot of work. Went off. Yes. In a high-scoring game. Yes. Isaiah also had a good game, too, for fantasy-wise. But between those two, I mean, they're both very startable going forward. Yeah, it's almost like McKinnon is in addition to this kind of crazy Kansas City pass game, whereas Pacheco will take the runs for the most part. And you know what? It works. Yeah. It works. It works for fantasy and it works for them. So who's the thing? Yeah, absolutely. So just want to throw a few names out there. Let's move on to our wide receivers. Get some more pickups. Again, wide receivers always a little bit
a little bit more juicy to talk about because we got more depth there at the position than we do running backs. So
there's always a way to find more wide receivers.
I want you to start because I think for me, this will be my number one pickup of the week. Like as far as between our whole podcast, I think this is the one I'd be targeting here. So go ahead and tell. You talked about him last week too, so tell them about him.
I was just going to bring it up. I hate to toot my own horn, but I actually love to do it. And we talked about Elijah Moore last week because, guys, he's a very talented wide receiver, and Zach Wilson's no longer the quarterback. That's all you really need to know. I mean, if we're being honest here, this was a Buffalo Bills defense that was very good. Mm-hmm. We had the backup quarterback in who got injured, and we had to bring the backups back up in. And he still did much better than he would have done with Zach Wilson at the helm. Okay, which tells you a lot. He had 10 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards, 12 points without a touchdown, which is a pretty decent fantasy day, and those 10 targets speak volumes, right? So I would be grabbing Elijah Moore with 2 hands. If possible, this is someone I would spend a decent amount of money on. Yes. If you need a wide receiver weapon, now is the time to finally kind of blow your fab. If I do say so. Yes.
Blow your load.
This might be the guy to do it on, in my opinion. And there's some other good ones today, too, so maybe not everything. But if you are really in need of a wide receiver, I would not hesitate to pull the trigger and spend that stuff.
I completely agree on everything you said. Mike White looks like to be a better, again, depending on his health, obviously, with the rib injury, but he just looks like to be a better passer, and he's getting the ball out to his playmakers, which Zach Wilson just never did. The 10 targets is really impressive. Obviously, 6 catches, 60 yards. But the other thing that to really highlight is we talked about Corey Davis's injury at the beginning. He sounds like he's going to be out this week, and he's been taking a lot of snap percentage away.
Yeah, good point as well.
And so this week, even especially, I do think that Elijah Moore is going to have a boost. And they're playing the Detroit Lions this week. Right? Am I thinking that right?
I'm not sure who actually they're playing this week.
I thought they were playing Detroit because I thought it was going to be a more high-scoring game.
You might be right on that. Let me look.
Yeah, vet that real quick. But if they are playing Detroit, it should be a higher-scoring game. Even with their defense, Detroit's just been looking really good out there with what they've been able to put together. So.
Absolutely. Detroit is who they're playing this week.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Who is the 5th worst wide receiver defense? So, they split up a lot of points. So you want to start your players against Detroit. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be Zach Wilson at quarterback. Elijah Moore is back. Corey Davis is not there to soak up a bunch of targets and steal catches away from him and for Garrett Wilson. So if you have Garrett Wilson also, you're going to want to start him.
Yes.
Start these 2 dynamic wide receivers in this matchup, and you'll see why we've been talking about this duo actually all year.
I would blow majority if you're in need of a wide receiver start this week. I would blow almost everything I have. I'd probably try to leave a little bit. As far as percentage wise, 80% of what I have. Leave 10 to 20% for
I think that's a good strategy.
Pickups later for defenses or whatever the case is.
80% of whatever you have left, he's saying.
Yes, 80% of whatever we have left in fab is what we're talking about. Yep. All right, I will jump over to mine. I'm going to talk about DJ Chark. I know everybody wants, rightfully so. I think we do need to mention Jamison Williams. Just the fact that he got on the field, he got a 41-yard touchdown. Looked good for that one play, but still down a lot of snap percentage out there, which we knew he's going to be taken slowly and brought along. So
yes.
But DJ Chark's back, and he has been good. Even the last few weeks, he's been a great flex play for teams out there. He's only 40% owned right now. This last week, he had 7 targets, 6 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown. That's a great week. Yep. And he's had 5 targets in each of his last 3 games. So having that consistency with Jared Goff, getting those targets every week, and typically with his targets, they're longer average depth of targets, so they're more valuable targets as well. He's very known for deep balls and contested catches, and so that's one of his specialties. And so these things all combine, and how good the offense has looked so far these last few weeks, and the Detroit's been playing very well. I do think that if you need a start, and going against the Jets defense we just talked about, this should be a pretty good game. I do think DJ Chark is somebody that you can plug and play as a flex.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just the volume of passes to kind of give you an idea of what Detroit's game plan has been in the last 3 weeks. Jared Goff has thrown the ball 37, 41, and then 39 times. I mean, they are not afraid to drop back and chuck this thing because they don't have anything to lose. And they're playing like it, and they're playing actually very well. And in those games, they lost by 3 points to Buffalo. They blew the Jacksonville Jaguars out, and they beat Minnesota by 11. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like that's
10-1 Minnesota.
Yeah, and it seems to be a very good strategy, for them. I don't think Minnesota's 10-2 though. I think they're 10-3 now, right?
Well, 10-3 now, yeah.
But yeah, so I do think that continues. If you have Jared Goff, I mean, just based off of volume, he might be worth starting. And DJ Chark kind of falls in that same category for me as well. Mm-hmm. I do think Jameson Williams, once again, in the long run, eventually will come into his own and kind of take more of that away from Chark. But
do you know what for dynasty purposes, of just curiosity since we're talking about, do you know what his contract is, DJ Chark's?
I do not, actually. It's a great question.
I'll look it up because it's only a 1-year contract, so...
Yeah, he's on a prove-it deal. And he's sitting here going like, look, I'll prove it. Give me the ball.
Fully guaranteed, yep. Okay.
You got to love a guy on a contract year.
Well, that, and just for the fact for Jameson Williams, this role is going to go to Jameson Williams probably next year based off of what we're seeing so far and how well DJ Chark's playing, and probably integrate him a little bit more. But that bodes well for what we've seen so far for Jameson Williams. I mean, only one catch for 41 yards. So that's in the talent. So just something to keep in mind dynasty wise.
Yes. Well, good things to come for Jameson Williams for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, I think DJ Chark is their guy right now. Jameson Williams has a lot to prove. He's a rookie. Dan Campbell's a prove it before you do it coach. And I think at the moment, until something changes, Jameson Williams belongs on your bench. I think he's still a good bench stash because you never know if he does have that breakout game what will happen.
That's true.
But DJ Chark is the guy to start. So I'm with you.
Perfect.
Cool.
Jump to yours, actually.
So mine is going to be someone you actually shouted out last week.
Unfortunately, did not come out because he was injured.
He was injured this last week, but with a fairly minor injury. He's expected to fully. Yeah. He's practicing today. Should be playing this next week, right? And that's Nico Collins. He's only 25% owned, and he has just been absolutely pelted with targets since Brandon Cooks has been out. The numbers he's about 10 targets a game on average over this last 4 games. Okay, so someone that just based off of pure volume. You want. And he's done actually pretty well with the volume, too. So it's not a shot at Nico. I mean, he's actually done good things. There's a reason why they're getting him the ball. But this is someone that, if he's playing, especially if Brandon Cooks is not, you could very sneakily win a fantasy championship by sneaking in Nico Collins, possibly.
I love this call. The reason I shouted him out last week, I mean, he's one of those players that, especially if you have a good team and you just need a good flex play to give you that solid 10 to 15 points, this is a good layup for you. The other thing to point out, too, they started Jeff Driscoll this week over Kyle Allen and long neck. What's his name? What's the giraffe's name?
Davis Mills.
Davis Mills. But Jeff Driscoll looked pretty good out there for playing and was able to get the ball out pretty easily and actually hit his targets. I know the week before Kyle Allen was really bad for percentage of catches and stuff like that. So I think that even bodes well for him a little bit more with either Jeff Driscoll playing or even if they go back to Davis Mills rather than Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen did not look good. So anyways, I think it's a great pickup. I'm going to talk about this one. I think I talked about it last week as well. I'm pretty sure
you did.
I did. I want to tout him again.
But for good reason.
For good reasons, yeah. So he's still only 15% owned. I understand why, but don't understand why. So I did talk about him last week. Demarcus Robinson for the Baltimore Ravens. He had 6 targets this week, 5 catches, 52 yards. I know that doesn't seem like much, but it's a good solid 10 points for a flex. Could do a lot worse out there, and he was by far the number one target outside of Mark Andrews, or actually really the same vein of Mark Andrews out there. So I think he is still going to have some target value. So if you if you need somebody to get 8 to 10 points, I think he'd be a good play. The only caution I have with this now, knowing that Huntley might be out this week, it might be a little bit more difficult, less confidence in playing, because we don't have a lot of information on the third string quarterback at this point. So
what?
I know, right?
Google his name earlier, didn't we?
Exactly. So I caution on that side, but I still think he would be a decent play at least.
Yeah, no, I think that he is just going to be someone that, once again, in an offense that needs targets, he's going to eat up some targets. And once again, we're at the point in the season where that is what we're looking for, is guys that are getting the ball. It's the number one rule of fantasy football, right? And Robinson has looked very good when he is targeted. Yeah. So upside that way, the quarterback situation is a big question mark, which is outside of his control and yours. But if
it's Huntley, I feel a lot more confident to go for it, which is
a pretty decent chance it's Huntley. I mean, you're looking at a 50-50 plus chance that it is Huntley. So Robinson is definitely worth grabbing. And if it's not Huntley this week, it will likely be Huntley or Jackson the week after. So
absolutely,
I like this pickup a lot.
One of the names I just want to throw out there, and then we'll talk about the people that are over 50%, but Jahan Dotson, and he was on bye this last week, but the week before he went on bye, he had 9 targets, and he really had that kind of re-breakout game, I want to call it, and had a touchdown actually as well. And we talked about at the beginning of the year that he had that streak where he was really doing very well for fantasy. He had 3 back-to-back games with touchdowns, and really started the year strong, and unfortunately had some injuries. The majority of the year was out, but did look good this last week back before the bye. So,
and I will say this: I think the offense looks better when they target Jahan Dotson. I really do, and I think that it just lets them spread the ball out a little bit, and things tend to run a little smoother rather than kind of pumping the same guys with targets. So I hope they continue to do that, and if they do, good things have happened when they targeted Jahan Dotson as well. So.
Absolutely. A few guys I want to point out, especially this first one, because he is only 51% owned, so he's really on the cusp. I even thought about throwing him in because he was so close. But
would not be a cheater.
I know. Zay Jones, he's been kind of the hot and cold man, actually. But when he's hot, he is hot. He's scorching hot. So
big game.
Yeah, so we'll just talk about his last 3 games. So week 12, he had 14 targets, 11 catches, 145 yards. That was a huge breakout game. Then came barreling down to earth right after everybody started playing him. So 7 targets, 2 catches, 16 yards. And this past week, went right back up to 12 targets, 8 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. So if these trends continue, he will have a 3-point game this week. But no, I think he's always a good spot start, in my opinion. Like, he's a good person to put in to get that 8 to 9 points, hopefully. And then he does have the potential. Some of these guys don't have that potential, but he has the potential to have a blow-up week, too, with the passing volume and with Trevor Lawrence looking good out there throwing the ball. So the only cautious thing I would put out there before this one is that they do play Dallas, which is typically a harder team to play against, but...
It is, but no, I think Zay Jones is especially interesting if you're in that situation where it's like, I might be very overwhelmed by the team that I'm playing. Maybe you just have recently had some injuries or something along those lines. He'd be very interesting to start in that situation and just say, hey, this guy has a chance to go out and give me 30 points, which how many people can you go pick up from the free agency
that have that opportunity?
That will have that ability.
Very good point.
Although the next 2 that you have, I love these next 2.
Yeah, these are definitely a lot higher owned. Donovan Peoples-Jones, is he...
58 is what you have.
58%. That might have gone up a little bit. But that's still possible out there. But had another great week. We've talked about him earlier this year. Had a very consistent weeks.
He's been fantastic, actually.
Yeah, he's been really good. And he always has that potential of a big play because he is very fast. Yep. And so he has some connection with Deshaun Watson, and actually Amari Cooper this week was limited coming into the game, and so it allowed Donovan Peoples-Jones to have some more targets and some more play out there. And it sounds like Amari Cooper might still be working through that injury. So I think he's a great flex play going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And then last but not least, you've got Drake London on here, who I personally love, especially with Desmond Ridder coming in and filling in for Marcus Mariota. Ridder might have been my favorite quarterback prospect of this draft. He's certainly the most interesting, in my opinion, and quite possibly the most volatile, maybe the most upside, in my opinion, of this year's draft. And so I'm really excited to see him play. I'm not sure that I would be confident starting Drake London going into a playoff thing, but he's worth watching, especially for dynasty purposes. Yeah. Especially, maybe if you have him and they have a huge connection this week, then maybe next week you're going to want to start him in your playoffs. So if he's available, Drake London, I would go grab him up. If you're maybe like a little bit of a lighter league, he is 61% owned. But he'd be a great stash for the playoffs kind of coming up here, assuming you have that roster spot available. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. All right, so that's our wide receivers. A lot to choose from. Some great names out there. Let's get into some tight end and defense, or QBs, tight end, QB, and defensive streaming to help those that are still streaming the position. I would say especially for some injuries that we've had at QB, and then tight end people always need help at tight end. So.
Yeah, I will say if you were listening to us earlier in the year, then you probably have Evan Ingram on your roster, and you don't need this advice because you have the guy who went off for 38 points last week. So watch the show, but also we'll give you some tight ends this week as well because we're
talking about Njoku when he's injured and that dip below the, to the streaming side. I told you pick him up, wait it out.
Yes,
that looks pretty good too.
That did. It looked great. So you already have a great tight end if you were listening to us, and if you weren't, listen now, and we will get you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with yours. I love your pickup here.
So this is very interesting. He wasn't really on my radar.
Is that because you can't say his name?
That is definitely part of the issue. Yes.
Yeah, I can't either.
So you want to take a stab at it?
I'm dating a Nigerian. I still can't say this shit. For the life of me.
Okinowo. I'm gonna go with that. Does that sound right? Okinowo.
No, but
Tennessee tight end Okunowo.
You gotta say it's the full name. What's his first name?
Chigoziem Okunowo.
Chigoziem Okonako. We're sorry.
Yes,
we are sorry.
Yeah, completely sorry.
You're very good at football.
You did really good things.
Yes.
You're very big. You're very athletic.
Yes. We got nothing but love, but we can't say it, and we'll figure it out. I'll bring my Nigerian better half in here and have her figure it out for us. Maybe she'll know. So, but anyway,
so currently he's only 14% owned, and I haven't really been paying attention, to be honest. He's been playing for Tennessee. They've been really down a lot of pass catchers with Traylon Burks going out, and they just don't have a lot of other options out there outside of Derrick Henry on the offensive side of the ball at all. Mm-hmm. Austin Hooper is still there, but he's really been a possession low, even not really involved a whole lot. But are we going to Okunowo?
Yeah, sure.
Okunowo really has been showing up these last few weeks, and the coaching staff before this week really came out and said they want to get him involved. He is a super athletic tight end, and he's very big, and he really showed it this week. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of Njoku, actually, for athleticism. I think he was
big compliments on the athleticism.
He was like in the 98th percentile or 97th percentile. I'm pretty sure. We're betting that here real quick. But this week he had 6 targets, 6 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. That is a beautiful line for tight ends. That wins you a week for tight ends. The more important thing, though, in the last 3 weeks, he's had 5 or more targets at the tight end position.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's involved, and they just came out and said, and they're going to get him more involved, and you're in an offense that needs the help, they're desperate for it. I think this is honestly one of my biggest suggestions for pickups this week. And if you are in a team that needs a tight end at all, I would really recommend going after him pretty strongly.
I completely agree. He's done a lot of really great things as of late, and he is one heck of an athlete and player. So go out and do yourself a favor and snag him here. On my end here, I'm going to be looking at Juwan Johnson for a starter for this week for a few reasons. First off, he's just coming back off of an injury, and before that he was on a bit of a run where he had at least 12 points in 4 out of the last 5 weeks that he was healthy. He did get injured early in the next game, and so did not really play much. But he has really been doing a very good job, and he has a fantastic matchup against the Atlanta Falcons defense, which we love to start people against the Atlanta Falcons defense when we can, because they are very bad. And
they are very bad.
So I encourage you to, if you need a streamer right now to win you a playoff spot, trust Juwan Johnson, assuming he is healthy. Once again, we're going to watch the practices, this week. But from the looks of it, he should be able to go. He was actually on the border of being able to go this last week. So the odds look very good for him being perfectly fine for next week, and I would want him in my
especially against Atlanta. I think that's a great call to have him as a great spot start. So excellent. Let's go on to our QBs. I'll jump in here first. I want to start Mike White. Who knew that we'd say that this time of year, but they're going to face the Detroit this week. They did last week. Did face a really tough D against Buffalo, and I think that showed with Mike White. He under pressure a lot. Broke his ribs. He went out for a few plays, but the prior 2 weeks he went over 300 yards passing in each of those games. So. Yes. And Detroit just gave up a lot of points to the Minnesota Vikings. They gave up over 200 yards to Justin Jefferson, who is absolutely unbelievable. But I say all that to say that I think this is a great matchup for Mike White. Softer defense, has 2 great wide receivers, good check down running backs. I think this will be, if he's healthy, which again with the ribs, if he's going to play, which I would imagine he's going to, but I would feel confident in streaming Mike White this week against Detroit. I think really for this game, I would want a lot of pieces in it because I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that whoever you can start in this game, go out, grab them, start them. It's really kind of been a theme today because this should be a really high-scoring game, guys. The Jets have a great offense. Detroit has a great offense. Jets have a pretty good defense, but Detroit has a terrible defense. Yeah. So, I do think that there's going to be a lot of passing involved in this game, and it should be pretty good.
Absolutely.
And then I suggest that you start Matt Ryan versus Minnesota for a lot of the same reasons. Minnesota's defense has not been good, as of late. Matt Ryan does have some pretty solid weapons over there. And it should be pretty easy for him to do pretty well against a fairly bad defense in what should be a game where Minnesota, wins, but probably quite a bit. But at the same time, there should be lots of garbage time for Matt Ryan to get his points in. So I'll be starting him next week.
Gotcha. So that means you feel confident in starting his wide receivers, right?
I would say yes. Yeah. What?
Just asking for a friend.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like the matchup. Okay. I think Minnesota is kind of in that same boat as Detroit. It's like they kind of naturally get themselves into high-scoring games.
Yeah.
And because of that, I like to start people against them. And Matt Ryan does have some very good wide receivers on the roster. I don't think he's going to get pressured a lot. Minnesota has not been very good at applying pressure. And when Matt Ryan doesn't get pressured, good things happen.
Yes, absolutely. Which has not happened a lot this year. So.
Yeah, no, it's true.
All right, let's jump into the defenses. This is important, this especially this time of year, to really start looking at defenses and play the matchups. Defenses are going to be the biggest thing. Obviously, all players play the matchups, but especially defenses. I feel like you want to target the teams that don't have good offenses. So,
yes,
I'll start off with mine. Mine is Carolina versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has given up the 10th most fantasy points to defenses currently. And Carolina's defense, low-key, has been actually really good all year. As far as
their offense wasn't so bad, we might have noticed.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? So
the team is bad, but the defense is good. They have some good young corners. They were able to pressure the ball. They've had 3+ sacks in each of the last 4 games, which is nothing to sneeze about. And then they had 4 interceptions over the last 4 games as well. So they're able to turn the ball over, get those really good fantasy points, get those sacks.
Do you think Mitchell Trubisky's going to throw a pick? Is that what you're saying?
Because exactly. The fact that Mitchell Trubisky is starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game, I think this is going to be a home run.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love this matchup. Pittsburgh is a great team to pick on, especially if Trubisky is the starter, which looks to be the case.
Yep.
I love it. Speaking of backup quarterbacks and bad offenses, I'm going to suggest that you start the Arizona Cardinals just like I did last week, and for very similar reasons. The New England Patriots have a very terrible offense. The Denver Broncos have the worst offense in the NFL currently.
It's statistically proven.
They're very bad. We'll see what Brett Ripon can do. Ripon?
I hope it's ripping because
he's just ripping it.
He's ripping it.
But any which way, I don't know if Brett can save them, and I would definitely be betting on Budda Baker and the boys over the Broncos offense right now. So I think that's an easy start for me.
Yeah.
Once again, as I mentioned, we're not just picking defenses, guys. We are picking on bad offenses.
Yep.
It's okay to be mean. It's fantasy football. You're not going to hurt their feelings.
No, we know who they are at this time of the year. So
yes, please start the defenses that are playing terrible offenses.
Absolutely. All right, those are our streamers this week. Go in our waiver wire. Go and pick up who you need. And good luck. Hopefully, you guys can get some great pickups out there. Let's move on. Let's talk about this week. Let's go into our good, bad, and the ugly. Let's see what's going on.
How do you want to start? Do you want to go ugly to good or good to ugly?
What do you think?
Well, you decide. Your call.
Let's do ugly first. Let's end on a good note this week.
Can I kick us off on the ugly then, though?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I'm very excited for my ugly. I'm not going to lie to you. I either want to do this one first or last. That's why here's what I think. So this is what I'm going to call toilet bowl heroes. Okay. Now these are people, and I hate to admit this on a fantasy football podcast where I'm supposed to be the expert, but these are people that I actually drafted in the rounds I actually drafted them in. And it's ugly, but I want to remind everybody that draft season is forever and a day away.
Yes.
It doesn't define your whole season. You can still have a good season even if you had a bad draft. And that even people who spend all their time studying this stuff can get caught up in the hype over certain players. And so let's talk about some of this. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown of one for each of the first 6 rounds of people I had actually drafted in at least one of my leagues this year. Okay, we're going to start off with round 1. We've got Najee Harris. Okay. Who has been, at some points of the season, we thought that he was going to be completely replaced by Jaylen Warren because he is bad. He has been consistently bad, and despite high volumes, it's still been pretty bad.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was not a great pick. Only drafted him in one league, but still. Javonte Williams. Now, I feel less bad about this one because injuries.
The offense wasn't what we expected either, so there's that.
Yes, and Javonte was not going to save that. It would have probably been bad had he been healthy. That's why he makes the list. After that comes Kyle Pitts. And one thing that I said at the beginning of the year is that when you draft a wide receiver, you also draft their quarterback, and you need to be careful. This is also true for tight ends, people. And you're drafting the offensive coordinator, play caller, head coach as well.
That's a big piece.
Which might be the bigger deal here on this particular call. And something not to forget and to remember for next year is that Arthur Smith is evil when it comes to wide receivers and weapons.
Yes.
Kyle Pitts has been terrible, and it's not been that he's actually been bad at football. It has been that he's just not getting targeted. And they're not throwing the ball. And Marcus Mariota is bad when they are throwing the ball. And then round 4, I picked Cortland Sutton. Round 5, I reached a bit for Juju Smith-Schuster, who he had a good week this week, so it's hard to complain too much about Juju, but at the same time, not a good overall pick. And then last but not least, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who we just talked about Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon being the running backs for that. Yet in round 6, I managed to draft a guy who's currently not starting despite being healthy.
Inactive, yes, on game days. That is 100% true.
So, it's ugly. I'm bearing my soul to you people so you can understand what we go through.
Yes.
What you are probably going through as well in some of your leagues if you have a lot of them. And completely understand it's okay.
Yep.
It happens. And we're here to help you get from there to a fantasy championship if you do make some bad decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in the same pain as you are, and fantasy football is not one for faint of heart. Like you got to go in, you got to know that you got to be able to pivot. You got to know when to call. Like I was wrong about this particular player. We got to look at fixing the roster, finding some other players that can replace this person I drafted in the 3rd or 5th round or 4th round, wherever the case is. So I think this is a great call out. I can do the same thing with some of mine. I think we're going to do something later on that will kind of highlight this a little bit more with some of the picks that we had out there and whether they turned out or not, and maybe even do a little tease of some fantasy draft for redrafting this year, comparing it to what we had before. But yeah, really good call, and put your soul out there. I like it, Ethan. So
yeah,
hurts on the inside.
It does.
Hurts a lot.
It won't help us if you liked and subscribed.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Make me smile more.
That's right.
Take the pain away.
Anyway, on to your ugly. What was ugly for you this week in football?
My ugly, and what I'm still just absolutely, completely, in utter shock about, is just the collapse that is the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's so crazy. It's insane. We talked about, obviously, they have really good fantasy options, like in the actual fantasy world, and they actually have a good offense and a decent defense, but they just keep blowing leads. It's crazy how much they get up, and then they absolutely get torn up in the second part of the game. Thursday night was absolutely insane. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but it was a quarterback that has been left for dead, that got picked off of waivers. Talked about Baker Mayfield that nobody had any faith in, including me, which he gave us no reason to have faith in him. And then he puts a comeback together, down 17-3, and a 98-yard drive against the Raiders to beat them.
The Raiders are so bad that they might have let Baker Mayfield have a comeback in his career.
Yeah, it's true. It's 100% true.
Honestly.
Yeah. So,
wow.
It's just insane. There's also been, I think, 3 or 4 other games that they've had where they've blown some leads. I just want to highlight some ones that I was able to pull off. I'm sure you saw some pictures out there on the internet, which I'm looking at currently. Yeah. So against the Jacksonville Jaguars, they were up 17-0 at just before half, around the 4-minute mark of the second quarter.
And surely they won that game.
No, they lost that one. And then they were up 17-0 against the talented, the division leaders, the top contenders in the AFC, Kansas City Chiefs, with 4 minutes left in the second quarter as well, 17-0, and they lost. And then another huge one, they're up 20-0 in the third quarter against the average to below average Arizona Cardinals.
I think they're 4-9 now, so we can say below average.
We'll say below. They are. There's 7 minutes left in the third quarter, and they're up 20-0, and they blew that lead too. So we're not talking minimal, they're up 7 points, even 10 points. These are above 17-point leads that are.
I don't know if I could name another team in the history of the NFL that has had four different 3-score leads blown in the same year, and we still have. What, 4 or 5 weeks left?
Yeah.
4 weeks left?
4 weeks left for
Yeah, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, 4 weeks.
4 weeks left. We have 4 weeks left. They've blown 4 3-possession leads.
Yep.
That's insane. That does not happen very often at all.
It goes on both sides of the ball. Defense, I think especially, the defense is not very good. But there's also, Derek Carr on last Thursday, he threw an interception that was there in the red zone, and he made a dumb play and threw interceptions, and that's the results. You do stuff like that, and it's just going to come back and bite you. So it's really the Raiders just feeling like they are doing Raider things, but I just wanted to point out, the ugly is the fact that they could be a lot better team, but they can't put it together. You
know what also is the great irony of this that I'm just kind of realizing right now is that, usually when teams have this issue where they're blowing leads, the blame gets put on the running back.
Yeah.
And it's they can't run the ball, therefore they can't finish. But they have the leading rusher in the NFL on their roster right now. So how are you blowing 3-possession leads?
Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
You know, that's just crazy. Yeah. Actually, yeah. I didn't think of that. That's wild.
That's super wild. Yeah. Who knows? They're a special type of team. Let's put it in those terms. So.
Absolutely. Okay, and then my bad here, because we're ugly bad, we'll get to good here in a minute, but my bad is going to be the Minnesota Vikings cannot stop blowing their season. I mean, you see
everything to do.
Like, you see them, and like they had all the hope in the world, and then the Dallas Cowboys came along, and they decided to just crush it. And then you've got the 5-7 Detroit Lions, and you're playing against your division rival. Right? When you are 10-2 and they are 5-7, they are on the cusp of maybe having a chance to possibly make the playoffs. You are basically locked in.
Yeah.
Right? This should be a slam dunk game for you, and the Minnesota Vikings cannot and will not pull it off. And we're from South Dakota, so we have a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans as friends. And I'm already getting the text messages like, no, they're going to blow it in the first round of the playoffs by a missed field goal. Because this is what Vikings fans have come to expect. Yeah. And I just want to say, like, for the fans out there and everything, like, and for the team, like, Minnesota, you got to hang in there. This has got to be a good season.
Oh my God.
Like, let's do something here. This is crazy.
It's insane. It's really crazy. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. Like, they know how to blow it every single time. I think the last 2 weeks they've had a chance to clinch the division, and they've lost both. Or, take that back. They lost it. They had a chance to clinch the division this week if they would have won, and they lost it. It looks like they don't want to just get to that point of being in a good spot. They just can't help themselves. The biggest thing is their defense is...
Yeah, it's been rough.
It's been rough. So, but yeah. They know how to really shoot their fans in the foot, give them a lot of hope, and just take them out back and end their misery.
Yeah, and hopefully Justin Jefferson, who's kind of the new face there of the franchise, I would say, a bit. I could change that for them. Because I do think that a lot of it's kind of will fall on his shoulders as a new guy up. So we'll see. But yeah, it's interesting at least.
It is very interesting. I am going to also talk about similar type of thing where we're talking about a very good team with a very good record. But I just want to point out, actually, I think it was last week, the week before, I talked about how good this team actually was as far as their defense is concerned and their running backs in their rushing game, which I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys, which was last week that I talked about it. But I do want to highlight, after watching the Houston-Dallas game, that it was ugly, number one, but they are vulnerable. And I think, honestly, what I really want to highlight is the biggest vulnerability is Dak Prescott. And it just, the defense didn't look that great against Houston as well, but there's been a consistent theme that a lot of people are overlooking just for the fact that the running backs have been so good with Zeke still being a really good pounder, and then Pollard is be able to have that explosiveness that we talked about as well. And then the defense has been so good as well with, destroying Minnesota. But Dak has been a turnover machine, actually. So since week 7, here's his interceptions since week 7. He's had, not in his first game back, 1, 2, 0, 2, 1, 2. So he's averaging at least an interception a game over that span.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you're talking about a team that has all of these tools and the ability to run the ball and the ability to play some good defense, get pressure on their quarterback, Michael Parsons, set themselves up really well, but they have this really Achilles heel right now with Dak just seeming to not be his complete self, because he's never really been a high interception guy. But this year especially, I don't know if it's the lack of talent outside of maybe Schultz and CeeDee Lamb or what it is, but because Michael Gallup has not looked.
And there's that thing we talked about too, where quarterbacks have to adjust to the new defenses that that are being run currently, which are kind of new and innovative and different than what they've seen before.
Yeah, my next quarterback I'll talk about is Justin pretty well to it though. So
he's done great. Where it's been crazy because some of these quarterbacks you see them adjust very quickly and do very well, and then you see quarterbacks that have previously been fantastic, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, honestly to a certain extent, and now Dak Prescott, who these guys have been not good. I mean, they have been fantastic quarterbacks in the past who are really struggling this year, and it's been really crazy.
Yeah, it has been. So I really want to point out that, though, like the game itself against Houston, and then also just the fact how turnover-prone Dak has been.
Yeah.
Dallas, although has this great record and they have some great tools, they have some Achilles there. I don't think of them as necessarily the top contender.
In half of his last 6 games, he's thrown 2 picks.
Yep.
That's not how you win a Super Bowl. No. You cannot do that in the playoffs.
Not against good teams. You can do that against Houston and still win. You can't do that against good teams.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm gonna hit mine. I'll do a kind of a quick one, and then I'm gonna let you rant for a minute because I know your last one here is pretty great. We're gonna end on some good news. You heard me earlier complain a little bit about Arthur Smith and Marcus Mariota. Well, let me just give a shout out and thank you, Arthur Smith. Obviously, you've been watching the show. You heard me complain, and then you went ahead and benched Marcus Mariota for Desmond Ridder, who is an exciting, young, new prospect, who's my favorite quarterback in this draft in the NFL. I think he's a gamer. I think he's got a lot of upside. He's very exciting to watch. And so... very athletic, big arm, and it seems like a very smart quarterback who will do things well. And if Desmond Ridder is who he very well might be, this could get very interesting for the Atlanta Falcons and their future and for my dynasty football team as well. So, but no, so I just I think it's really cool that he's going to play. I'm very excited to watch him play. It's going to be one of the biggest things I'll be watching for this week, and it should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. Cool to see it. Obviously, I think we both agree that it probably should have been done a lot sooner for not only for fantasy purposes but just for the team purposes too. I think Marcus Mariota does not seem to be the answer at quarterback for any team at this point. So I think at least you have hope with Desmond Ridder, see what you can have and what you can do. And keep you kind of close here going forward. So
yeah, and if he goes out and he beats the Saints in his first game in, I mean, the Falcons are going to be looking back and going like, man, what could we have been?
Yeah, exactly.
To be honest. So, and I think that just chance that happens, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about the Eagles. So I want to just kind of break it down a little bit or just talk about it. They locked up the first playoff spot, so they are locked in currently. They had the path right now to be the number 1 seed and get the bye in the playoffs. But really, they're honestly, in my opinion, watching the football this year and in its entirety and really kind of scouting the teams as far as who are the top contenders for the Super Bowl right now, and who do you have maybe to win it? And really, the Eagles have been one of the best complete teams out there, in my opinion. If you look at it, Jalen Hurts, we talked about, he's really strongly in the MVP case. He had a really amazing game this last game. He's really putting the ball on the money to his wide receivers. He's able to run. He had one game he ran for over 140 yards on the ground. That puts another dynamic to, obviously to the team and allows them to do that. They have the great wide receiver core with A.J. Brown. Really, I think, in my opinion, A.J. Brown is at least top 8, probably top 6 wide receiver in the league, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if he's definitely probably not in that top 5 or whatever, but he's got to be at least somewhere in there.
There's an argument to be made for at least. I'll put that.
Yeah, and then of course you have Devontae Smith, who's a rookie last year, top prospect, really good, and he's been really coming on recently too. Unfortunately, they had Dallas Goedert go down for injury, but with that core and then the offense, really the biggest thing for them on the offensive side of the ball is their offensive line has just been absolutely dominant and cohesive. And there's something to say about that. And they had that game, and I can't remember who it was against, but it was actually a primetime game, and they just absolutely ran the ball all over. I think it was when Jalen Hurts had that 140-yard game, but they just ran the ball all over whoever they're playing, and they could not stop them to save their life. And one of the best things about the Eagles, why I think they're so good, is they can beat you both ways on offense. If you are weak against the run, they will pound you to the ground with Jalen Hurts, with Miles Sanders, who's actually a really good running back. They got some great other stables with Kenneth. With
Miles Sanders, one of the sneaky fantasy picks because he's been so good on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or like I said, Jalen Hurts can beat you with his legs so easily as well. So if you cover that, then you have to deal with these wide receivers.
On their defense.
And even Quez Watkins out there, he's so fast, and then you have to deal with the other wide receivers. It really opens things up. And then
a great gadget player for them, and he can step in if one of the other two get hurt too. He's actually can play the role. So. Yeah,
and then you talk about their defense, which has been one of the best in the league here too, with the cornerback play. Defensive line has been getting a lot of pressures. So I say all this just to highlight, I really think right now, to me, Eagles are one of the top spots out there. They've been amazing for fantasy in a lot of different ways, and I think that if we were to predict right now, I'd probably pick them for my NFC Super Bowl representative compared to some of the teams out there. So
they're very good.
They are very good, and I think that they have a chance.
And if Dakota were here, he would let us know that the world cannot handle another Philly Super Bowl, and that's the problem. But we might just have to be able to do it because, quite honestly, they look good enough to win it all. So
you have to get over it.
It's going to be exciting to watch. And the playoffs in the NFL, the real playoffs are coming up, which are always a good time and always fun to just tune in if you're a true lover of football, which I think if you're watching this, you probably are. So.
Definitely.
Cool. And then we're going to give just a little bit of quick playoff advice. So if you're in the playoffs, I just encourage you to, as we kind of talked about throughout the podcast, it actually kind of became a little bit of a theme. But so take it 1 week at a time. Don't try and win the championship this week. You've got to win next week. Make sure that you have a complete starting roster that you feel confident in, that you are looking at your matchup and changing and adjusting things. If you need to take more risks, take more risks. If you need to take less risks, take less risks. And be the judge of that and go out and do what you need to do to win right now and get to the next round. And then once you get there, you can do the same thing next week. And it becomes kind of a fun game of just let's make it through. And so that's my advice if you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of pile on that with a little bit of deviancy, but I would say we talked about the fab. This is the time to blow your fab. We talked about if a player comes up where you feel like I need this player, I need this position, blow your fab. This is the time we're not holding on to it. The only thing I'd say is keep 10% maybe if you need to pick up a defense or somebody later on, but blow 90% of whatever you have remaining in fab for a player that you need to start, because this is the playoffs. If you don't win, you're out. So the other thing I will say for as far as playoff advice, real quick, is to, focus on this week, especially for your individual players. However, one thing I would say to stay ahead of the curve is to look at defenses for the next week. So
good point.
Because that's the one thing that is going to have a big impact is we talked about defenses especially. It matters so much on who they're playing, not necessarily how good the defense is all the time. So you want to target, obviously we talked about Houston, we've talked about Denver, we've talked about there's these defenses out there, or these offenses out there that are so bad that if you gather those defenses and you have them for the following week, you can set yourself up, if you do win, to be able to have another great defense ready to roll for that.
Yeah, most definitely. Love that take on it and could not agree more. And then if you're out of the playoffs, we haven't forgotten about you. We completely understand. As I told you earlier, I drafted some players.
For you.
If you had to guess, I'm out of the playoffs in a couple of my leagues as well. And here's what I'm going to say is just be a good league mate. Cheer your friends on. Don't suck. Like you sucked at fantasy football. That's okay.
Don't suck.
But don't suck as a human being and as a friend and whatever else. Part of this is social, and it's about that group of people that you're surrounding yourself with. So be a part of the league still.
Yeah.
Watch to see what happens. It definitely is still going to be important.
Yeah.
And also just don't be that guy that drops players just to see if people race to pick them up, and don't don't win your toilet bowl. Don't do that stuff, man. Just be the person that you would want to see if you were in the playoffs, and have some fun with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Don't be the sourpuss is the best way to put it. Get over the fact that you lost. You lost. It's over. Nothing's going to change that. The things that I'll highlight, like you said, is still watch the football. I still pay attention to fantasy. Pay attention to your other fantasy friends' matchups. See how they're doing. But watching the games to the end of this year, including the later weeks, it can only help you especially for next year. This is where you start to see some people that break out that might not have had the opportunity earlier in the year that can really impact fantasy next year. We saw Elijah Moore break out last year around this time. We saw Devin Singletary break out last year. We've seen back in the day Adam Thielen was really when he broke out was the last few games of the year. You can see people really start to take on new roles at the end of the year for their teams. Especially if the teams are out of the playoff and they're really starting to play their younger guys.
Absolutely.
So, and even if you get into the playoffs, you start to see that talent really rise above, which can really impact.
We're going to watch Desmond Ridder break out this next week. I mean, might happen. Who knows?
You never know.
I'm optimistic.
It could be happen. So, again, don't be a sourpuss and pay attention because it'll impact next year. You can start kind of your preparation already because fantasy never stops.
That's right, especially if you're in Dynasty. And if you're in Dynasty, get ready you should be excited to gear up for those off-season trades that are coming.
Yes, absolutely. You can start preparing for yourself for the trade season that will be coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah, and if you watch all these games and your league mates did not, think about who you could sneak by them and they won't even know. They won't have an idea that Elijah Moore is so good until you
steal it from under the nose.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and if you're not in a Dynasty league, that's why you want to be in a Dynasty league. So when you are eliminated from your redraft league, you could have something to look forward to.
Exactly.
Great mix.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with the Storment Bros today on the Fantasy Play Callers. We absolutely have loved doing this episode and having you guys. We're going to continue to do these, at least to the end of the football season, and then we'll do some recap episodes and some different things as well. So keep an eye out for that, as well as some possible Dynasty content in the off-season as well. So keep an eye on the channel, like and subscribe below, hit that bell notification icon so that way you can use it. And may your bids be $1 over.
Always $1 higher, and good luck out there, and fantasy playoffs. Let's go.
Let's go. Win your league.
Win.